Welcome back. You're still watching Newsfeed PM, the late edition. So concerns are mounting that not enough is being done to return the city of Johannesburg to its former glory following a scathing SIU report which was tabled in Parliament yesterday. The city is plagued with dilapidated buildings, poor infrastructure and dysfunctional traffic lights, amongst other challenges. While the organisation Undoing Tax Abuses CEO Wayne Duvenage joins us in studio now for more on this. Wayne, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's interesting that we talk about what, the SIU presents to Scopa in a report when we live in Johannesburg, and for the most part we're able to see, the things go wrong. I immediately think about how just of late we've been having a discussion around, 70 million rand that's needed for the traffic lights in Johannesburg. You don't need to read it. You can see it in the city.
Yeah, it's been coming for some time, a long time, so it hasn't happened overnight. This is, we'd say, about a decade and a half of really mismanagement of our finances. And when you're not going to put money into infrastructure maintenance and planning, long-term thinking about how to deal with so many of the challenges that we have, it catches up. And now the hole just gets deeper and deeper. We've heard about the bridges. A high percentage of our bridges in Johannesburg are not safe. The water leaks 40% more, plus we just lose water that we're paying for. The vandalism, it just goes on and on and on. And I think we have a city that is poorly managed, mismanaged from a financial hygiene point of view. And it's not going to change until the political meddling, the political interference that takes place in all these tenders is dealt with. And we've got to look to who's running the city. Yeah.
The observations by Andy Mutibi that we heard yesterday. Collusion between supply chain management officials, bid committee members, service providers, overpricing of goods and services. We're not surprised.
Yeah. Look, I mean, feeding the middlemen in all of these layers. We've done some exercises over time. We're paying for every kilometre of road we pay for. We should have got 3. We are overpaying for everything, and that's because there are so many people that are connected to the deals. And when you have entities like City Power, like Pick It Up, Joburg Water, and all of those with these boards, and on those boards are not the professionals that should be there, but people that are connected to businesses that do business, so the conflicts of interest are high. Well, this is nothing short of corruption. It's that blatant and it's so brazen. And I think what we're seeing is that there's a leadership there that probably realizes in 2 years' time they might not be there, and they are plundering away so brazenly, and nobody's doing anything about it.
One of the committee members in that session raised an incredibly important point, and it was around where we have officials that are caught to have been involved in collusion of some kind, and there is action that is taken against them. Quite often they are suspended, and we need to talk a little bit about what we do with officials when we find them, right? There's the suspension, and then the committee member also raising the point about, at times, these officials will then approach the CCMA, be cleared by the CCMA, and then somehow find themselves back in those posts. And there was a question then around just how far, if it is an issue of rot in all of these various institutions.
Very much so. And the idea of purging the good people as well. So trumped-up charges, we saw that with the CEO of Joburg Roads Agency, Louis Nell. We saw that with Sarika Lakraj in the finance departments. It's easy to bring up trumped-up charges, push them aside, and then you just wear them down in court because they don't have the funds to defend themselves. They use our taxpayers' money to do so. And they put in those positions people that are pliable and manipulable. And sadly, as I say, these tenders are the tender rigging that takes place. It's rife. The Auditor General has just spelt this out. The irregular expenditure that is taking place from 8 billion to 11 billion rand over 3 years up until 2023. And the sad thing is that the city does nothing to go after. So it's there, it's obvious. They can go and claw money back, and they don't. Well, that tells you that they know what's happening. There are probably people that will, there'll be a backlash from them, and so the chain goes on. It's sad, it's shocking, and nobody's doing, and the oversight that should come from province, nothing's happening there. I mean, if this was happening with good oversight, you would have the city put into administration. Just today, they're applying for another 2.5 or 2.8 billion rand loan. So we're having this noose just put around, a death noose put around the city's throat for future generations. Now, it is fixable, but never going to be done by people who are creating the problem.
Yeah, I wonder how much of this has to do with us just having, I suppose, some of the legislative framework that has gaps in it. And by that, I mean, you've got, for instance, the Mutibi saying that, you know, the NPA had referred 12 fraud cases that are now under investigation, all of that happening. But at the same time, when you go into the various departments, if you go into the city, for instance, recommendations that are made to deal with an official simply aren't followed. And there isn't a mechanism to force the city to do something.
Yeah, and this is where civil society gets frustrated. So in our Joburg Crisis Alliance, we hear there's a lot of frustration, and the real issue is what can we do? And we have a democracy, people get voted into positions of power, but it's when they abuse it, you can't wait for the next election. So what are the forces that we can bring? And we have to explore that and collaborate and work together, which is what we're trying to do, to find how do we pinpoint the issues and light the fire in the kitchen of those people who are creating these problems. Because if they're not going to investigate their cadres, their buddies that are being implicated in this corruption, well, then obviously the senior management's involved. It's the only way we see it.
I want to look at this data, okay? The City of Johannesburg's water challenges, well documented. And then what you've got is some of the surveyed areas in Johannesburg. This was what was found: 2,396 burst pipes, 6,727 leaking meters, 442 leaking valves, 259 leaking fire hydrants, and I mean the list goes on and on and on, and we can talk about some of these issues, but what this does to our infrastructure over the long term then as well, because you can certainly talk about the rot in the infrastructure now, but that speeds out some of the decay in the years to come. So can we actually say that we will see the City of Johannesburg turn around, and what kind of leadership structure needs to be in place? We're getting it to 2026, the campaigning is going to start.
Yeah, it is going to start. So yes, it can, but every day you wait it takes longer to fix. So all you have to do is put it on the right trajectory. So the first thing I would do is to say you have to start with a zero-based budget, because we've got a lot of contracts that needn't be there. We've got contracts in place for decades that have just gone up by CPI all the time, probably more because people are connected and nobody's questioning them.
Yeah, what does that mean, a zero-based budget? Yeah.
Zero-based budgeting means look at everything. Take a good look at what does the city need. If you go and see all the supply contracts that are in place, some of them are no longer necessary, but if nobody's looking at the financial statements and the expenditure and the contracts that the city has, you know, this has been spoken about at the senior levels in Treasury. We need to start looking and applying our minds to zero-based budgeting. You'll be able to find that you can reduce the costs of the city. You can start auditing how many people you have employed, how many ghost employees do you have, do they work, what are they doing, should you have them, because a lot of positions are put in place to firefight a specific issue 5 years ago, and they just remain there. They're not pulled out of the system. So a zero-based budget is going to take a good telescopic look at what is the city spending its money on. Does it need to spend its money on that? And I reckon that you can save the city a few billion, probably up to 10 billion rand if you just did that. Now, you've got an 84 billion rand city budget here. It's not that we don't have the money. Just go back, you know, we did the exercise on local government across the country, 17% above inflation plus 1% year-on-year compounded. So they have more than enough money. It's just the problem is not a funding problem. It's a spending issue.
Yeah, it's interesting because you really give us the what. I argue that the problem with a lot of our leadership is the who. So we can talk about a zero-based budget that looks exactly at our finances, but the question is who does that? Who do we trust to do that?
Well, we should have the finance meetings that are taking place, the impact meetings. They're not taking place as regularly as they can. I think the city, the management, the MBC for finance and the city, they should be looking at, the MMC should be looking at the finances and taking control, but they're not doing that. I mean, look at our metro building. It's just been vacated and we're renting. We're renting buildings across the city from connected cadres who own those buildings at inflated prices. That's unacceptable. So they don't want to move back into the metro building. It needs to be fixed. You need to get people back into work. So the city cannot operate in the way it's being managed right now. And then we want to go and spend billions revamping the Usundiso building for the mayor's office. I mean, this is crazy. You don't have city management with a mindset that is citizen-centric at the moment. All they're doing is thinking for themselves, not for what is best for the people of this city.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the major incidents. So you mentioned Usindiso building. I'm thinking about the gas explosion that we had in the CBD on Lillian Goy Street, and we actually just showed a visual of that. And I mean, there's so many of these incidents, and then there's the time that it takes for us to see repair. All right, and so as the decay continues, the repair. So let's talk about what Lillian Goy Street looks like at the moment, and the repair that's still necessary there.
200 million rand paid to a contractor who runs away with the money, and the city says, "Oh, it's not our fault. The contractor disappeared." But you know, if you're going to issue contracts, you can prevent that. They play victimhood all the time. You know, the N5, the Gauteng province extension to the Beyers Naudé Drive again. You start the work, 2 years later, everything's stopped, half of the costs have been paid, and everybody's run off. Now, that is a symptom of extremely poor management, mismanagement, people who are not following up, making sure that you don't pay a contractor half the amount up front. Of course, they're going to disappear. And then there's no accountability. The person who signed the check, the contractor themselves, they're not held accountable. Nobody's rounded up. So you look at the mayor and you look at the MMC of Finance and you say, you're the problem. It's not the contractor. You, as the management of this city, are the problem for our financial woes. And stop blaming the people that, you know, if your collection rates drop to 83% in any business, it's the business management fault. You've got to collect that money. And in many businesses, you struggle to have recourse. Here, you can switch the lights off and the water off if people don't pay. So if your collection rate's going down, don't blame the people. Look at your systems, look at yourself, and look at your management. So our management in the city of Joburg is absolutely weak and putrid. And it needs to be addressed. Yeah,
but I want to actually just look at, it's a little bit of emoting, if you'll allow me, but we talk about, you know, the city of gold and how you've got the, you know, people moving into the city looking for opportunity, you know, the sort of romantic story around the city of Joburg. But the reality is it is the economic hub of the country. With this deterioration, can it continue to be, and what is it costing us on an economic trajectory point of view?
Well, it's costing us a lot. You know, there's so much invested in the city. If you speak to the business developers, the people who own properties, if we don't arrest this, what you will have is stranded assets. You will have empty warehouses. You will have empty shopping malls. You will have empty buildings, and that's happening. People are semigrating, and we cannot allow that to happen. This is still the economic powerhouse. It has the potential to become the vibrant economic hub and centre that it used to be, and can be and should be. And I'm not talking about used to be going back to apartheid days. Just go back 15 years. Halfway into our new democracy, we were doing so many things right. We were paying our bills to Eskom in the city. We were paying water. We didn't have the leaks. So the infrastructure has to be addressed, and we have to get the leadership right. It's simple.
But what Outa has its eyes set on for the city of Johannesburg? I mean, we for many years talked about e-tolls, and we managed to come to the other side of that. What you're setting your sights on?
Well, you know, I think that we're never going to be able to do this on our own. So collective, collaborative approach with various civil society organizations, working with community organizations. We've set up an entity called the Johannesburg Community Action Network, or Joburg CAN. And we need to put together a plan that is going to hone in on exposing and making the lives difficult of the leaders who are plundering away. When you do that, when you shine the spotlight and when you light the fire in the kitchen, we've done this in many cases where we see corruption in CETAs, for instance, in NESFAS, and that we are able to see change happening. And politicians who are caught plundering, and it's not difficult to do that and find that, become embarrassed when their headlines and names are spread out in the headlines, because they go home. They've got friends who start saying, I don't want to be seen with you. Their family come home and say, I can't be seen with you. You know, it's just you've got to frustrate their lives and get them moved out. But the big thing is we've got to have oversight as to who replaces corrupt people in the city, and that's not going to change while you have the current politicians and the political meddling that takes place. So I guess, is it a case of waiting for the next elections? I don't think we can wait 2 years. We've got to do as much as we can to get in the way of the corrupt and expose them, and then start preparing. And we had a great session today with the Social Justice Initiative, learning a lot about how this is done around the world. But we really need people to start participating in democracy and businesses. We need to get the word out there that things can get better and change, but it's not going to change sitting back and doing nothing. You have to work at this. It's hard work.
Yeah. Wayne, an absolute pleasure having you in studio. And I think having you here just reminds us the importance of continually having this conversation.
Yeah.
Wayne Duvenage, of course, is the CEO of Alta.